All right. I'm waiting for the YouTube thing to catch up, but no, it's live ahead of us. Hello, Poland. How are you doing?
Doing well, Blue. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. I kind of miss Michael and Bandito, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm a poor substitute, but I figure I can't let you go it alone.
You're no poor substitute. You're just the fourth leg of the table that, like, it's where we miss you a lot, man. We do.
I appreciate it.
All right. So, do you have any? Today, we're just going to go over campaigns. Do you have any campaigns that you know you want to go over?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. That was a jump. Well, tonight we've got what is this? Where's my mouse? God, this thing is weird. Okay, Florida Man is closing tonight, and it is up to 566. Last I refreshed. See how it's doing on backers. Yeah, 568 on backers so far. So good for it. Have you seen this one? Nope, Poland's muted. I think he's a little busy. Alrighty, so when you come back, Poland, if you have any thoughts on Florida Man, I think it looks hilarious. Full of American stupidity the way it should be. But also, Mike Barron wrote this, and he says, no, it's a lot more humor based on situational things. So it's not that kind of slapstick American laugh track thing. It's just a little more intelligent than that, from what I could gather. Anyway, so if you're interested, there it is. And before we get moving, a quick shout out to Unstitched. There she is, which is going to be by our friend Justin. So that's still out there, 15 days to go. It really does deserve attention. So we're trying to get Justin back on so he can show you that it deserves attention. That'll be good. Hey, hail and well met to Smiling Bandito. Is this the public chat? How does this work? All right. Then Poland's back. Poland, do you have any thoughts on Florida Man?
I like the look of it.
Okay.
I'm pretty discerning about the books I pick up. And I like the fact that Mike Barron's on there.
Mm-hmm.
As someone still learning about all the famous names, I've heard nothing but good things about him. So I've definitely given it a few looks. And I've also learned that this is apparently a real meme, which I wasn't aware of as well.
Ah.
Which is funny because I live in the South.
Okay. Um, so have you looked up that meme since then?
Yes. Yes, I have. There's entire aggregator websites for it.
He says that one thing he's not including in the book are the more salacious Florida Man stories. That he's leaving that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
So anyway, you ready to move to the next
Not
tab?
based on real life events.
Yeah, based on an aggregation of what real life events look like, but not all of them. So,
Right.
now I'm really tempted. Let's see. Now I'm not logged in on this window, so we're good. I am really so tempted. Here we go. I should show this off. This little postcard here. Does it get bigger? Yeah, a little bit bigger. That image, they have a towel, as you can see right down there.
Yeah.
I hope my mouse is coming through. Yeah.
Based off the suntan lotion.
Uh-huh.
I forget the brand.
Coppertone, I think.
Coppertone, yep.
Yeah, with the little doggy and the kid.
Yes.
Yeah, I want that towel, but it's just like, oh, that's a whole additional book right there for another campaign. That's gonna hurt me. But thankfully, he has sold 14 out here of the towels. The postcard's the same image, but and did I hit that? Always these stupid little pop-ups to answer. And 29 more towels out here in this bundle. So good for him. Good luck to him. You recall Unstitched?
I actually wasn't there for that one, so you have to bring me up to speed on it.
Okay. Unstitched is about a teddy bear who is rescuing and protecting a little girl who from her own bad dreams. And these are all the nightmare creatures of her dreams. I have so many books in my head right now that I'm seriously going to screw this up. But we see her with her parents. She's a bit scared to go to sleep. The nightmares come for her at night, and she needs protection. So this is what they look like. And could we... I don't think that gets much bigger. Oh, there we are. Yeah, that's about as good as I'm going to get on it. So there is a teddy bear brigade that protects children like her. Only this demon we see above the bed kind of eats those things for lunch. Sort of a kid's story, but not for kids.
I was going to say, is this like quasi horror?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, just a shout out to Justin for that one. And Control W. There we go. Oh, I want to remind people there are links in the description. And I really like hearing you guys go through these like this. Thanks, Bandito. Appreciate that. Just want to remind people that there are links in the description for OKURI-INU, the Oni Within. And that's... Oh, there we go. That's this guy. Chaotic Neutral Comics is putting that out. And another link for the sign up for the Robert. If you haven't seen his artwork yet, this is what that looks like, the background image there. So there we are. Now, you said you're discerning about your books, Poland. Is this your style of artwork?
I think it would be.
Okay.
Yeah. I was telling him at the time when we had him on the show, that reminds me of one of my favorite games on PC, and I actually sent it to him. Shadow Warrior. It's actually an old 90s shooter that they remade, so to speak, I think in 2013. And it has that same mystique. You know, you're a guy who wields the katana, but you also use guns. So, you know, you have like the gun fu thing going and all this other stuff. And some of the type of Japanese mythology incorporated too, with the demons and whatnot.
Huh. Well, let's take a look at that. See if I can find it. This one?
Yep. That's the original.
Cool.
There's a newer one too.
I don't think that gets bigger. There's a newer one. Okay. Is the newer one a sequel or a remake? Or do you know?
It's kind of like one of those spiritual successors, so to speak, but they essentially went and remade the first game.
All right. Neat. You played it, of course.
Yeah. Not the original, but I played the remake.
Okay, cool. So guns and samurai swords. Nice. That's the way to go. And then we also have Robert. I like this artwork, pencils wise.
Yeah,
initially.
Robert's amazing.
And then the coloring is another layer. This is just awesome. So I don't know if it'll come through in the YouTube video, but he's got all kinds of almost like two-tone textures in there to do his shading with. You could do it. I know you can do it with computer, but to do it right, it takes some skill. All right, moving on. Let's see. All right, is there a book off the top of your head that you want to look at?
Be honest, there's not one that comes to mind immediately. I think the big one that's really caught my eye has been Kozor as of late.
Okay. See if I can find
I think Graveyard Shift is definitely getting plenty of publicity. Of course, that's going to be awesome. Aaron Alfecci and everyone, the whole crew. But Kozor has really been a surprise for me. That book looks amazing.
Hit it. There it is. I found it.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of some dark fantasy stuff I've seen in the past. You know, if anyone's ever played Warhammer, you know, played around that universe, you know, maybe a little of the darker D&D settings as well.
I like this cover. I think it breathes. What's kind of funny is I've never had I think that thing sticking out there on his leg. I think that's called a vastus medialis. I have never seen one natural that big relative to the other two bits there, and then there's a fourth one that makes it the quad. But I looked at this, and this was just like, something is not shaped right. I don't get it. I've never seen anybody this huge. So I think Bandito made a comment like that. He says remakeable regarding your video game. Yeah, it's a good word for it. Anyway, Bandito made a comment like that. This guy never skips leg day. But that's true. Something I like a little bit about this artwork here is the coloring isn't necessary to separate the foreground and background. If we get to the black and white version, don't get nauseated as I scroll. There we go. You know, all those little tricks about thick line in the foreground and thin and lighter lines in the background and all that. Here, my eye is, in my dyslexic eye is, I instantly know this is a foreground character, and it comes together despite all the little details and whatnot. It doesn't get mixed up with the background real easily. So this was pretty easy for me to look at. Now this is the kind of artwork where I have more trouble with it. At first, right around here, I couldn't tell what was going on in this area. You know, even though, yes, I could tell these are eyes and a mouth, that part was easy. So sometimes I have a little trouble seeing black and white artwork that's really detailed like this. It throws me.
Yeah, it's extremely dense. You have to excuse me, Blue.
What's up?
I'm going in and out with my roommate, so if I'm muting up, it's because he's saying something to me.
All right. I'll try to keep an eye on it. If I can, I can't move.
I just didn't want you to think I was just peacing out.
No, I thought there was a lag.
No, you're good.
All right. Well, I'm going to flip through. Tell you what, Poland, interrupt me when you can. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I've been chiming in here. Like I said, this book came out of nowhere for me. I had no idea what Clayton was going to be doing. It's just hard to keep track of everyone. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, wow. I had no idea how talented his brother was. Must run in the blood.
Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, Clayton colored this and did touch-up work on it to, we'll say, alter the pencils a little bit here and there. And what I like is the colors make sense on one level, and then on another level, it's like looking through a prism. Everything's in rainbows. See, this makes much more sense to me. It's frightening stuff. All right, I'm going to move to some older stuff. Nope, wrong one. Actually, I wanted to go this way. So I got a note a while ago, like 2 days ago, that Chateau Obsidian here was closing. It's in demand, and it just I guess it takes a few days to close once they hit the button. And so just to remember that there are books out there not to be forgotten. This was a good book. It was the number one that I read, and it was intended, this is issue 2, to be an all-in-one graphic novel, but that didn't work out IndieGoGo wise, so he's doing issues. And you could really tell that issue 1 was a setup. So issue 2 will jump forward. Here's issue 1 over here. These two, this is a variant, I think. And then artwork for number 2. So we're going to get deeper into some things because that's what happens in issue 2. So if you had read issue 1, some of these images might start to make a little bit of sense, but it is a multi-year, like there are 2 eras in the story, 700 years apart. And it's just a mystery across both of them. That's just words. So Chateau Obsidian, it could be gone by tomorrow. Don't know. Now I've got all these tabs open up here, but they're arranged chronologically, and we can jump around if Poland so wishes. So next one up was Chaotic Flux. Let's see if I got remake one. No chats. Having trouble. I got 3 windows I'm trying to track, and then 2 more windows for utilities. So Chaotic Flux is here. He's still open for, I have no idea when he's dropping it, for his issue 2. He's already been delivering on this, so that's all good. No worries there. Scott Payne. Got a bunch of little variety in the perks. So he's continuing the first story, and then I believe issue 3 will pick up with a new story focusing on a different character. This little girl, in her background, that's this woman, and this 2-issue arc is essentially her background that got her to where she is now. And these are all images from issue 1. And then issue 2 continues them. I believe you can still get issue 1 with this book. So just a reminder that things exist. Moving on. So one of our favorites, John Gallagher and I'm going to say her name wrong. Carla Tornielli. No, Tornielli. 2 L's in Spanish is like a Y in English. Okay. I can't say her name. But here she is. Look at this nightmare. It is just awesome. I like she does manga, so I really like her work. Just the eyes on that horse of fear. Tornielli. That's supposed to be the Grim Reaper riding a horse there, our title character. And he's an interesting character too, rather sympathetic.
And what's great is that Carla and John have both kind of started new shows recently. You got Masked John diving into the cultural issues of the day, and then Carla has started on a new YouTube channel, a little bit of a mama artist blog. I think it's called Manga Maga or Manga Mama, I should say.
Mangaka Mama?
Yeah, there we go.
Something like that. It's got like extra syllables in it.
Yes.
She's such a sweetheart too. She's so honest. She's just like, I'm pregnant and just want to tell people about it. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly right. I mean, I was in a pretty foul mood the other day, and I pulled up that video. I was like, this has uplifted me immediately.
Neat. Was she eating ice cream in it?
No, she was just kind of fumbling around with the camera and whatnot and showing off her working space.
Cool.
Very endearing as always.
I can't wait until she gets to that phase of like ice cream with sardines in it. That's pregnancy right there. If you're crying with ice cream and sardines and telling people, don't worry, it's just hormones. That's pregnancy. Look at that. She's a great artist. Okay. Since I learned Cyrillic at one point, I don't like it when people misuse the characters. Like, this is not an O, that is not an A. It's just me being silly. So this has a spin-off add-on book to it. This is from the main book, I think. No, I'm sorry. This is part of the spin-off book, I believe. No, Carla and John are a real sweetheart. Are real sweethearts. So if you want to and she is a good artist. If you want to catch their streams, I highly recommend getting over to their channel, White Cat Comics, and subscribing. This is the image for their t-shirt. All right, so just reminders that these things exist. They are fulfilling book 2. They did get the books in, but they still have leftovers, so that's why this is still up. Xenotype.
I heard this guy's troublemaker.
I know. Everywhere he goes. I think this is his starting form before he gets in trouble, though.
Yep, Xenotype. I think everyone is familiar with it, for better or for worse at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And
sorry, I like the art.
No one can dispute the skill that has been put into this book. There may be other controversies, but that is not one of them. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a pretty premium product. You know, I'm not even a manga person myself, and this has gotten me interested in manga.
This has a very different style from Attack on Titan, but Attack on Titan is a pretty thought-provoking book. So Attack on Titan's art is a lot more scribbly. This is incredibly detailed. So if you want to try another manga, that's a good place to start, just because the story has depth to it. It's really funny hearing 12-year-olds talk about Attack on Titan. If I run into them, all it is violence and monsters eating things. And this is way long ago, like I think when volume 12 was out, and now they're like double that. But Attack on Titan is you could look at it as a discussion about what is the true nature of freedom, if people can be free inside a barrier at all. So I think you might, if you are new to manga, that's another one to get in on. And then of course there's always Dragon Ball. Jump back for that stuff. Anyway, I am looking forward to this because of some things Liam said about the writing, that this might actually be a really good piece of literature for kids to grow up with. Were you around for this one, Poland?
Yes. That's why I had my Bologna one on that night.
Ah, right. So look at this, uncolored and colored. Pencils, inks. Now I'm halfway through this book, and it is about the death of Achilles so far, halfway through, his entry into the underworld, and his reassignment to not the usual death. And where that's supposed to go is a battle between all the warriors of all the different worldviews and religions for control of the underworld. So it's also really pretty too. It's all shiny like this. When you first saw this campaign, Poland, what was your first reaction that you recall?
I was a huge fan, actually, because this is a time period that I really enjoy. I always like the retellings of classic mythology.
What got you into that?
Well, I actually went to school for history, and when you get bored writing boring academic papers all the time, it's nice to delve into some historical fiction. So you're not completely off topic, but you're able to relax your mind a little bit and delve into some of these more exploratory things.
Okay. So have you read some of the actual classics, Homer and whatnot? Oh, sorry, he's got a sidetrack at the moment. Yeah, the coloring here is good. Now the book looks just like this too. So they're starting a battle, and this is the battle in which this is a double-page spread, obviously, and it's the battle in which Achilles will be killed. So where are we? Ah, yes, hybrids. This is still out there. I do have issue 5. He is fulfilling, and I should do a review on issue 5 just because I did one on 1 through 4. So he recaps 1 through 4. If you're not sure about it, you can get info here. What I really liked his characterization. His characters are distinct. That's not, overly generic superhero. Like there isn't a ripoff of Superman and a ripoff of the X-Men or things like that. So that's good to see. And also, the guy who did this one, Luke Stone, he lettered Elysian Fields for us, which is pretty good. There's a very funny interview with Luke Stone that, it's really with Michael from Elysian Fields, but Michael Odin. Luke was in that interview too, and so he starts telling a story about how he got to do artwork, and he was telling the story while he was drawing the giveaway. Scrolling down. Sorry, not giveaway, but this high perk. It's a one-off that he drew. Anyway, and it was just funny just knowing that he's evangelical, and I think he grew up evangelical. That when he started drawing superheroes and all these big muscly dudes, the way he puts it is, "Hey, Felix Haas," the way he puts it is, people started asking him like, "Are you doing okay?" Watching a early teenager draw muscly guys. So let's see what Felix Haas has been saying. How do I do this? I think I go like that. Yeah. Oh, he's not feeling well. No problem. Well, I hope hail Felix. Hail always sounds weird for me to say. So hello, Felix, and I hope you're feeling better. Okay, how do we? There we go. So that's cool. Looks like I've lost Poland, which isn't a problem, except for boring y'all to death. This variant here in the green cover, it's all black and white inside, and it's based on a grayscale of the colors. So it does look pretty cool. So these things exist, and we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, a bunch of them. Tell you what, I'll make this our last one. I have these books. If you're in the United States, they're hard to get. So the short story behind there's a short story behind getting them, but here we go with this is a lot of Australian humor. and, so I like the art. I think the art is well done. Yes, those are drop bears. That's a question that comes up all the time. So Baza is just a father with a family to defend. And he's not really made a buffoon of, which is a good thing, because we're kind of tired of that. But the humor in the first of the 4 books was pretty much just making fun of everything. It was a zombie book. And then there's a backup story that comes along with this. So that's this one, Zombie Apocalypse. I'm partway into Alien Invasion. There's the creator right there, the guy on the left. I forget what the guy on the right does. Now, when I went and got these, email wasn't working from is it Silver Fox Comics? I can't reach it from here. Yeah, I think it's silverfoxcomics.com.au. I think that's it. These guys, they had here we go. These are Australian dollars, and the rounding always changes a little bit. So I threw him 10 Australian just so I could send a message. And then we talked a little bit over email about will he sell to an American? And yes, he's willing to sell to an American. So he created a perk down here to be shipped to America. And there's no extra shipping on this. That's the price. But he knocked 10 Australian off of it because I had already paid him. So this is the wrong price. Unless he updates this perk, I would ask a favor that if you're going to, it should be 150. If you're going to grab all 4 of these books in the US, go back up, throw him an extra 10 Australian as a tip to make the price correct, because otherwise we're kind of harming him. Let's not do that. So anyway, these books are really funny. I have no idea if it's Comicsgate officially, because we didn't talk about that, but he's very compatible. Hey, Poland, you're back.
He's cool with us.
Oh, he is?
No, I mean, he sold to you, Blue, so.
Yeah, okay. So, I guess I'm the litmus test.
This doesn't seem like let me just put it this way.
Mhm.
If I had to rate this on a scale of kosher to SJW, I would say it'd be more towards the kosher side. That's my sense on this.
Define kosher.
Good old fashioned fun, entertainment, without the guilt.
Mm-hmm. In fact, there's a lesbian in the first book, and she stays and coaches him in fighting in the second book. But there's a lesbian in the first book, and you get the idea that he's a little bit put off by activists, and so is presumptuous about whether or not she might be an activist. So it's like, okay, sure, and then they just move on. But she's a good character too. So at the beginning of the second book, he's in a little like amateur prize fighting for pink slips, which means they're going to trade cars, and she's his coach, his corner woman. So yeah, I like the book. It's funny. All right, we've gone through a bunch of these. I loaded up way more than necessary. Poland, any thoughts?
The only thought I have, Blue, is how overwhelming the variety of choices that we have now. I mean, as opposed to a year ago or 2 years ago, when it was only a handful of books. I mean, like I was saying earlier, now you feel like you're always missing out on something new every week. And, before you know it, one campaign has ended, another one has started.
Yeah.
And now you're actually having to do a budget. Like for me, I can't support all these books, especially with all the shipping and everything. And it's just, I mean, in a way it's good because it means there's something for everyone. But, you also want to try and support as many people as possible. And it's just, becoming more difficult to do that as time goes on because we got so many, which, like I said, is a good thing as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, we want to see this type of growth.
Now, you like historical fiction. What else? What other kinds of fiction do you like outside of comics?
Well, before I got into comics, which I don't know if a lot of people know, but it's only been a couple of years thanks to Comicsgate. It was actually the summer before last that I bought my first comic book thanks to a recommendation by Zach, and that was the Silencer book, written by Dan Abnett.
Yeah.
And that hooked me because I had actually read, this will lead into the stuff I used to read before. I actually used to read a lot of his sci-fi books that he would do for a universe called the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It's a property that he's worked in a lot. It's a dark sci-fi, high gothic. It's often described. It has a lot of those motifs in it. And I always enjoyed his writing. He's one of the few authors I've read that wrote a very compelling first-person perspective book. So everything is from the character's perspective, and that's all the information you have. And I think that type of storytelling is so much more challenging than, say, third-person omniscient. So when I saw that he was on a comic book that was recommended by Zach, who had started following just for cultural reasons, him and Ethan, I said, let me go and give this a try. And that's why I picked up Silencer. And I think I picked up one other book at the time, Catwoman by Joelle Jones, because her artwork is amazing in it. And she writes as well. So she's kind of like Michael Bancroft, a little bit of a phenom herself. So those are my two first comic books. But in terms of fiction itself, mostly sci-fi, some historical fiction, but a lot of those sci-fi books, particularly in the Warhammer universe, and a handful of other stuff.
Okay. So yeah, and isn't Warhammer, now I never got into 40Ks, but it's a pretty hard sci-fi, and isn't it also military sci-fi?
Yeah, so the premise of Warhammer 40,000 is that humanity is in a very dark place in the 41st millennium. There was a time before where they had gone out and explored the galaxy, and they had a sprawling empire, and then there was this great maelstrom that ripped everything apart, and they call it the Age of Strife, when everyone was cut off from each other, and essentially all knowledge was forgotten. And so the Warhammer 40,000 takes place in the aftermath of this and some other really large events. And like I said, it's unique in the fact that it's a very dark sci-fi. It's a very grim place. I mean, there's even a term that they refer to as grim dark as a theme, and it came from Warhammer 40,000 because in the intro to all their books, they start with the intro of "in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium," and yeah, essentially, it's humanity is in a constant state of war across the cosmos for survival with these various other civilizations, and there's also some other elements in there too, and they have these beings called the runic powers, the chaos gods, as they're referred to in layman terms, who are essentially gods of certain passions, such as rage and lust and pestilence. And so they're also battling against these really metaphysical threats as well. And, growing up as a kid, I played the tabletop game, which then led me to the books. because the tabletop game, you get the models, you paint them. I was into models from a pretty early age because I did a lot with my dad in terms of World War II models. And I said, oh, well, I have some models I can get now and I can actually play with and throw dice with. So that's cool.
Nice.
So that was kind of the bridge for me there into those.
Now,
Yeah,
when you were,
it's definitely not for everyone.
when you were doing World War II models with your dad, is that where you learned to paint them?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I never got quite as good as he was, but that's where I did a lot of my painting early on.
And then you carried that over to the 40K miniatures.
Yeah, because a lot of the basic principles still exist. You're trying to weather things up in certain cases, do edge highlights, and you learn all these base techniques. And no matter if you're doing historical or sci-fi modeling, you can apply them universally. Pretty much the main difference is going to be what palette you're using for certain things. So of course, if you're doing historical things are going to be a little bit more drab and plain, as they actually were, as opposed to Space Marines from Warhammer 40,000, where you're going to have some guys who are blood red in their armor with yellow highlights and white highlights and all these fantastical things. And so that's the biggest difference, honestly. But once you have those techniques down, you can apply them across whatever you're working on at the time. So I just transferred those over. And like I said, you get into some of these things where maybe you just don't know how to do a certain effect because it didn't exist on a World War II tank. There was no plasma glow on a World War II tank. So those are some things that you may have to occasionally look up, but you'll find that, it's like, okay, well, I need to build up from blue to white, and these sorts of things. And that's similar to what you would do, maybe for an engine glow on a plane or something. So, you just have to go and look up kind of the way certain people achieve certain effects and apply those.
Okay. So you really learned about how old were you when you stopped painting the miniatures and playing?
I get back into it now, and I'm in my 30s now. But when I stopped is honestly when I got into late high school. I got too involved with other things and, getting ready for college and going off, shipping off. That really soaked up a lot of my time, getting all my P's and Q's in line because, in early high school, I had not done that. So I was making up for lost time, to be honest. It wasn't me being studious necessarily. So it's like, okay, well, I didn't do these things early on, and now I need to play catch up. So I had to drop a few hobbies there towards the end. Yeah. It's been about, probably 13 years since I've actively painted. I've definitely played some games in between then, tabletop games, board games, just to give myself, honestly, a rest from a screen. And, I think we all need more of that. But honestly, when it comes to painting, it's been, 12, 13 years at this point.
So you were a history major in college. What influenced you towards that?
Well, what's funny is that I didn't start out in history. I started out actually in physics. And I was in physics because I always found it fascinating how if you're in the field of physics, you're essentially on the edge of how we understand reality, right? Physical reality as we know it. So I had some Stephen Hawking books growing up, read through those. Richard Feynman, yeah. 6 Easy Pieces, great. I mean, he's one of those guys who really, like, a lot of people like to talk about what's his face nowadays?
Hawking.
Well, not Hawking. The other guy with the mustache. He does a lot of speaking. He's on the science. He used to be on the Science Channel a lot.
Oh, not Sagan. He's no mustache.
No. This guy is he's the black physicist. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, I could see his face still, but I couldn't get his name. It's like I got the face, and then he said he's black. Too. I'm like, I know, I can see him.
Yes.
Oh, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did follow him as well, but I find that he's very derivative. Actually, a lot of stuff he uses. If I'm put it politely. I mean, he's got some great insight, but I think I think with Feynman, he had the fundamentals down as well as the ability to, communicate them to a layman and communicate these concepts. I find Neil deGrasse Tyson, a lot of people like to compare the two, and that's why I brought him up, because he also does a lot of pop culture talk and all this other stuff and likes to talk to people who are outside the field. But honestly, I find him pretty lacking by comparison.
Yeah.
But Feynman growing up, I mean, he was huge. Hawking was huge. So yes, I started out in physics. I loved it conceptually. It was okay for me in high school. When I got to college, though, the everyday drudgery of doing actual physics-based equations and all this really was, I found to be soul-sucking. And my minor at the time was history, because my other passion growing up was, reading about historical events, particularly in my own background, being Lebanese, reading about the Phoenicians and what they did, and the Carthaginians and what they did, which is why I like to go by Hannibal on some platforms. Because, we draw some ancestry to them tangentially.
Oh.
And history I saw as physics is the history of the universe, or you can tell the history of the universe in physics. And when you actually study historical history, not to be too redundant, you're just studying the events that we've experienced. So in a way, I almost saw them as being related. So I just swapped my minor to my major, and did a lot of writing. Essentially, is what that resulted in. And then, having read a lot of books growing up, it came pretty easy. Maybe a little too much so, and just stuck with it. Didn't really have a plan coming out. Was in law school very briefly, and now I find myself doing bookkeeping. So definitely following my whimsy from here to there.
Yeah. Well, at least there's some coherency to what you did, to be honest. I know some other stories that aren't quite as coherent as that. But yeah, you changed majors for a good reason, and it sounds like it suits you. Actually, it's funny you should mention Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm glad not to be the first one to say anything negative about him. I know a philosophy major who, I say major, but he's 28. He's finished 10 years ago, and he was talking about Tyson and a few others, and how some of them aren't actually scientists. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And he went through forensically how they speak and what they speak about, and yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson isn't a scientist; he's a spokesperson, just very plain and simple. So I'm glad my friend isn't the only one who can see that in him. So there are a lot of supposed scientists. Another one's that Korean guy, where they really are just spokespeople. They're not good scientists themselves. So they're fronting for something or other, and sometimes it has a bit of an agenda more than science to it. So that's a little disappointing. But as far as Feynman goes, I was very young, and I remembered seeing the later videos after the Challenger shuttle blew up of Feynman sitting through the hearings that were either in front of the Congress or the Senate or who knows what. This ended up really shaping me, so I'm glad you mentioned Feynman as well. My father was a great fan of Richard Feynman. I had books of his and stuff. But looking at the replay of the Challenger hearings, Feynman got fed up with the gobbledygook and being fed stories at these hearings, so he went out and just did his own research at NASA. For whatever reason, he was allowed to walk around and talk to people. And of course, everyone after 7 people die like that, everyone's kind of on edge. But a whole bunch of engineers kind of whispered to him, "Check the O-rings," and that's where looking at the O-rings, part of looking at the O-rings came from. But it was always very on the sly. Nobody could be blunt about it because heads were going to roll. So then finally, Feynman was back in one of the hearings, and he had this thing in front of him that we found out later was a glass of ice water, and what was sticking out of it was a medical forceps. So after going through all the gobbledygook from what these representatives from NASA and God knows where else were presenting to obfuscate the issue in front of I guess Congress, he said, "Let me see if I've got this straight." And he had this skill for cutting through bullshit and saying, Here's what it is. And he pulled out of the glass of ice water an O-ring. And it had been folded in half. And I believe he explained what he had done is, this is an O-ring. I folded it in half. And look, when I take the clamp off of it, you're telling us that when they get cold, they lose their elasticity and they don't reform their shape correctly. And right in front of him, the O-ring did not flatten back out into an O. It stayed bent like a taco. And so, of course, at that point, the press goes nuts because most people in the press barely got through, high school. They went to college, but I've dealt with journalism majors and it's not pretty. So so at that point, once everything's laid out in plain language for everybody, that was Feynman's real skill, was cut the crap. Here's the point. This is what things are. And I really enjoyed that for him. But that influenced me from my father, who admired that in Feynman, where, I'm probably not formal enough in the appropriate settings like I should be because this was Richard Feynman. So I'm glad you brought him up, though. That's for me, it's a good trip down memory lane. So yeah, hey, Poland.
Yeah, I think he definitely goes underappreciated, especially now in the modern pop science scene. You have these people that there's this commentator who refers to them sometimes as like the capital S with the trademark R science that people refer to nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like, follow the science, trust the science. It's treating it as if it's some type of encompassing doctrine when really it's just a method to achieve the truth. It is not the truth in itself. So yeah, I think he's somebody that goes underappreciated, and I think we have poor substitutes for him now, to say the least.
Yeah, even some of his old lectures, which you can find online, I think through Annandale or something like that, they still hold up. I mean, they're good lectures.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I go back and I listen to Milton Friedman often. Amazing talks he used to give.
And they still hold up now, right?
They do. What I recommend a lot of people do is, go watch old episodes of Firing Line that Buckley used to host, having all these people on there debating the ideas of the day. And it's funny how many of them are still relevant now.
Yeah. Truth doesn't go away, does it?
No.
Cool. Well, all right. So any last anecdotes that have popped to mind before we close up?
Men's how personal we want to get here, Blue. I got all types of stories. I don't know if anyone necessarily wants to hear any of them. I'm not a particularly interesting person.
Yeah.
I did participate in the 7-hour Oz stream the other day, and then I came back and I was part of the 8-hour Michael Bancroft stream because I just felt like, torching my sleep schedule even further.
Do you have limits on your data when it comes to something in my view? Just it's Shane Burgess. Hey Shane, how you doing? Michael Bancroft says he loves the science. So do you have limits
all about the science
on your traffic when it comes to your internet?
It's some limit. I don't think I've ever approached it, honestly.
Okay.
Maybe it's like a few terabytes a month, something like that. I seem to remember it being something in that range.
Oh, mine is, I think, down to 150 gigs per month.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
And
maybe mine is closer to that. I forget.
Yeah. Thank you, Shane, for pointing out that Bandito is not a person.
Bandito?
Yeah. Bandito is our missing colleague. I'll fix that later. No, I'm kind of curious, maybe for another time. I don't know, but 40K. Did that lead you? Well, I'm curious about several things around there. For one, did that influence you towards the history major in the background?
Oh no, the fascination of history came first.
Okay.
40K came about in middle school, and I had started my fascination of history long before that. I would say probably second or third grade, because I've had the Hannibal moniker as long as I can remember. Once my dad set me down one day, he's like, "Yeah, some of your ancestors did some cool things. Let me tell you about it."
Huh.
And another big figure my dad liked to tell me about when I was younger was Henry V. And I think it's because he really enjoyed the Henry V movie from the late 80s, which I have a DVD copy of, and it was in limbo for a while. There was some legal dispute, so for a long time you couldn't even get a copy of it because there was some type of ownership dispute regarding it.
So Henry V.
Yeah.
I am terrible at history. So on that note, what do you think is the consequence of people like me who are terrible at history?
Well, I think we see it playing out right now, right? I think the biggest consequence is perspective. And this happens in a couple of different ways, all of them mostly being negative. Number one is that people think that they're the best, smartest people ever to live in this moment we happen to find ourselves in. And then you also think that whatever you're going through tends to be the worst thing ever. When if you were to actually look into it, you would discover very quickly that it is not. So it's because we have iPhones, we presume that we're smarter than our predecessors. When from a moral standpoint, from a principle standpoint, we're still tussling with a lot of the same ideas that they were. And I would argue that some of them had better insight than we do now. We've kind of gotten away from that.
My weaknesses, my preference in history, in today's world, hey, Shane, guess who forgot a apostrophe S? Anyway, in today's woke world, you just make it up. So fair enough. My weakness in history being mostly somewhere between Greece. I loved ancient Egypt, didn't get a lot of Babylon, loved Greek, and
I don't think many people get Babylon, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I liked Roman, and that encompassed, I think, 5th or 6th grade right there. So that's the level I was learning at. And then jump ahead, and my next big, cheers, Shane. My next big, what do you call it? Interest starts with pre-World War II, so there's some reach kind of back into the 1800s, but not a very good, thorough one. And so I know I'm missing a whole lot in there. And just using me as an example, because I don't know anybody else's brain. It seems like all that whole lot in there that I'm missing really matters for understanding today, not just looking at, how we got here after World War II or a lot of the American history. It seems like somebody in my position is missing some of the philosophy. So when I started learning about fascism and the history of postmodernism, it started to fill in some of those gaps. But sometimes I just feel really lost when I hear historians speak like, oh crap, my education is in the toilet. So you talked about Hannibal and the Carthaginians. Sorry, I can't say it. How do you
Carthaginians.
Say it? The Carthaginians.
I gotcha.
Thank you, buddy. And all the important stuff they did. I want to hear more about that. I really do, just because it's like, just don't want to overstate it.
They're the only serious. They're really the only serious power that ever. Well, I'm a little biased, but they were really the only serious power that challenged Rome during the Republic era, I would say. Of course, Rome had some pretty big enemies later, like the Parthians and some other guys, but the Carthaginians were the ones that kept Romans up at night.
How so?
Because they were right across the Mediterranean from them, and both were fledgling empires at different phases, and they both had similar regional aspirations, which was not very common back then. This was kind of a novel thing. Where you're going out and confederating people and getting them to become citizens of your nation. And you're expanding territory, you're trying to expand your trade routes and these sorts of things. Really all the nuts and bolts of empire building. And Carthage was the only one nearby that was on a similar level to what Rome was doing.
So for ignorant pigs like me, where exactly was Carthage? I thought it was...
It's modern Tunisia is where it would be.
Yeah. Okay, so North Africa.
Tripoli, yeah. Tripoli
Alright.
is basically on the skeleton of Carthage.
Ah, I see. Because I always think of a lot of the Roman interactions as being somewhere between Greece and Macedonia, hooking around eventually into Egypt, but I never think enough about North Africa. So, okay.
Yeah, North Africa. So Carthage was a Phoenician colony that, like I said, was part of the Phoenician colony system, I guess you would call it. They didn't really have, I mean, as you explore these things, you find out that they didn't, terms weren't as big a deal to them back then, categorizing things, but Phoenicians had a system of colonies they used to find resources, make new trade routes, and do all these other things. And that, for reference for people, Phoenicia was modern day Lebanon, so directly east of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. So they had started a colony in North Africa. They had colonies in Spain. And eventually, a lot of these colonies ended up becoming independent bodies. And Carthage was the most notable example. And a lot of the other colonies that ended up going independent would end up joining up and confederating with Carthage eventually.
I'm trying to find a world map for you. So, as Carthage gained power by soaking up all the little places around it, the smaller, basically building an empire, that's what kept the Romans up at night.
Well, yeah, because they're playing over the same territory. You had Sardinia in between. Sicily was a huge point of contention between the two of them. All these sorts of things. So, yeah, it was a pretty big deal back and forth.
Yeah, history is important to understand. How did we get where we are?
And a lot of the boat designs that the Romans ended up utilizing came from the Carthaginians.
All right, I'm pulling this up. So over here is where we have, whoa.
Yeah, you see, they're actually fairly close in proximity once you think about that body of water there.
So Cyprus to right over here.
Yep. Phoenicia is right there. Byblos, Sidon-Tyre, all very historical. If anyone is even has a peripheral knowledge of the Bible, you've heard of those cities.
Mm-hmm. Sidon-Tyre and Babylonia. This map is cut off. I've got it all the way slammed over. And then, so Phoenicia was this area, somewhere in this area. Forgive me for being imprecise. And Carthage was all the way over here.
Yep.
Oh. Okay. I don't know what to ask next. So your dad.
Well, there were 3 wars between them.
Okay.
There were 3 Punic Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an ongoing struggle. And of course, with Hannibal, that was the most notable of them. And he was one of the only people to really threaten the Roman homeland ever. ever. And he didn't really lose to them very often, if at all. Not until the very end, really. And that's why a lot of people find him fascinating, is because he was able to challenge them on the field, which was at the time unheard of, in terms of the Republic of Rome at the time. And, there is some lessons to be learned, even in his loss. Some of my friends would make fun of me growing up. So why do you idolize a general who ended up ultimately losing the war? And, that's kind of a pretty shallow perspective of it, because he may have lost, but he showed people that you could that Rome could bleed, essentially, and bleed a lot. And this would lay the groundwork for people later, going up against strong powers like this, how you could utilize tactics, not just strategy, because strategy kind of describes your overall, what you're going to do overall in the war. But tactics, battlefield tactics, describes how you're utilizing the forces that you have in the moment.
Okay.
And he was a master at this. a master. Every one of his battles, I mean, it would take hours to go into, but every one of his battles displayed some type of tactical genius and awareness that he had. And what's funny is that he didn't really have regulars. Carthaginians were a bunch of traders and um, artisans. We're not big on the whole fighting thing. So a lot of people he had were mercenaries, and they came from various tribes he had recruited. So they weren't even people who were, had a great coherency, I guess you could say, as a fighting unit. And he was able to make this mishmash, this conglomerate of, mixed forces and irregulars and whatnot work for him, which makes it even more fascinating.
Now, when they were worrying the Romans, here we go. Was that at a time when the Roman? Because I don't know how these timelines line up, except that the Romans eventually did not fall to the Carthaginians, if that's correct.
Yeah, Carthage got salted eventually.
Okay, because I know that Rome did fall after it lost any sort of moral fiber and became so much of a cult of the emperor that it was sort of that propaganda of you think about the emperor all the time, and that's part of my layman's version of it. If you want to correct that, I'd appreciate it. So,
well, the empire fell into disrepair. The Eastern Empire became the power base in the end, and the Western Empire had really fallen from its earlier ideals. There was no civilizational coherency anymore.
mm-hmm.
It had become balkanized. A lot of people they had taken into the citizens didn't really adopt the old ways. There was a lot of factors. Of course, some people famously attribute it to the rise of Christianity, which was a factor, but wasn't the factor.
Right.
And actually, for emperors like Constantine, it was actually a galvanizing force. But like I said, that was more in the Eastern Empire, which would come in and save the Western Empire from the Huns there in the late period. But it wasn't enough. I mean, their fall was inevitable. So of course, eventually you had the Visigoths who came in from the north and would pillage Rome, and there was just no one left to defend it. Essentially, I mean, it had decayed.
Now, leading to that, I remember a little bit about Francis Schaeffer. I didn't get too deeply into him, but I do remember one of his presentations describing the fall of Rome. He approached it from a moral aspect, and one of the evidences for the moral fall leading to the society falling apart, leading to the decay that then makes it easy for just anybody to come in, was could be seen in their artwork. So the evidence of the moral decay was demonstrated in artwork. And I remember him showing coins for this, where earlier Roman coins were very precise when they were struck, etc. And the later Roman coins were just not even half-assed. They were just kind of schlocky material. So what I'm kind of wondering is I forgot to ask. I'm doing this in the wrong order. I meant to ask first, what was the time frame between the fall of Carthage and the fall of Rome?
Fall of Carthage and fall of Rome was let's see, it's probably about 600 years, give or take. I mean, some people define the fall of Rome different, but that sounds about right.
Okay.
I've never actually measured those two dates against each other.
They never taught us about the Carthaginians in school. Never. But in terms of the moral decay, where I was going to go with that was, I'm pretty sure that moral decay was after the fall of Carthage. You're saying 600 years. Okay, yeah, never mind. That's a pretty big basket to hit.
Yeah.
So I was estimating in my head something that was so obvious. No, never
yeah, that's
mind.
why I made the distinction that this was during the Republic era. So, this was before the rise of any Caesars or emperors for them. And this was the largest threat that they faced during the Republic era for sure.
Okay. Now I see, I think this is the black pill incoming that Michael is referring to, because I don't exactly know what black pill means. So I see.
I'll be curious to see what his black pill is. Black pill is like, there's no hope sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Like taking the red pill is when you wake up to certain truths, and the black pill is like the truth is very bleak and there's no hope in it.
Okay. Well, not exactly black pill coming. What I was thinking was from Francis Schaeffer, it sounds to me like we're on the precipice of entering that era of total apathy. But we're not there yet, and things could still be turned. Ha, not
Right.
black yet, Mike. And so I'm kind of curious. Do you see patterns playing out in modern world history that let's say I hate this thing, but the Anglo-American Empire or the Euro-American Empire, which should not exist, because we should be. That was a slang that came, from the first Roosevelt, um, to when he was being influenced with anti-American sentiment from Europe, and that influenced one of our presidents, which is kind of scary. So he was one of these who saw humans as a virus, but that's our term for it, not his. So I'm wondering about, in terms of the fall of Rome, where do you see parallels that the world is on right now?
Well, one of the biggest things I see, Blue, is that Rome got to a point of absolute supremacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They dominated the region. By the way, Shane, I'd be curious to see your source on the salt. But it actually dominated the region. So they were able to get to a point where they didn't really have any worries anymore, right? You had complete dominance. You had the era of Pax Romana, this long, I think it was 2 centuries of peace, maybe a century long peace. So you start to forget what real problems feel like, what real challenges feel like. And you enter this period of decadence and you forget all those principles that got you to this apex. And I would think that is what we can draw from the most in our modern time, is that, we start creating problems. We can start creating strife,
Mm-hmm.
which you see a lot in pop culture now, because we don't have a depression to contend with. We don't have a Nazi Germany to combat and fight. We don't have a Carthage to take down. We don't have these demons that we have to contend with, and it is absolutely necessary. And it gives us this, clarity, this moral clarity, and this imperative, right?
Yeah.
And so you fall into decadence. You fall into apathy. You fall into neglect. And that's exactly what happened with Rome in a lot of ways, is that they achieved such a point of supremacy that you're no longer vigilant. You're no longer guarded. You forget what got you there, and then you fall. I think it was Ernest Hemingway that says, it starts slowly, and then all of a sudden, when he was asked about how he went broke, I believe the question was, and that's exactly how it happened here. And you see it with a lot of these civilizations. They'll hit a certain apex, and then, a lot of times that happens with conquest, just straight up conquest because they got overpowered. But in the case of Rome, I mean, it was really a corrosion from within, an erosion from within that eventually got them, especially in the Western Empire. The Eastern Empire lived on through the Byzantines
Right.
up until the 16th century, when they went up against the Ottoman Turks and got walloped. But in the West, I mean, there was a complete decay.
Well, I'd like to think that we're not there yet in our West.
Hey,
So,
hopefully not. Hopefully not.
actually, we're over an hour. Um, Thanks for your input on the Roman Empire. There's good food for thought. I hope people watch this later too. But this is it's just coincidence, serendipity, I think, if I'm using the word correctly, to be on Xeno. I flipped over to Xenotype, just the next tab, while you were saying that, and I have a video already on why I'm looking forward to Xenotype. Is it sounds like a story that will help children grow up, just as many other stories helped us. And that would be the hope for the future, is that we pass on our actual cultural values and live them out instead of this decay from within. So kind of an ironic thing a coincidental thing to end on there. So cool. I guess
Yeah,
we'll pick up with the. Sorry.
I just real quick, I love the weight that Liam puts into his books. Well, one book right now that we know of. He's apparently written other things not attributed, but I love the emphasis he places on what this means to his eventual readers and the impact he wants it to have on them. I think that's a lot that is missing, not just from the mainstream, but other sectors as well. Is that it may seem like a small thing, but being able to get these things out there in the culture, have people ingest them, take it in, and process it, can make a huge impact. And we've seen this in the entertainment industry at large right now. A lot of people picked up Twilight, and that led to some weird places.
Yeah.
When that became popular, right? It led to some things going mainstream that kind of weird. So I'm hoping that things like Xenotype can come in and, fill the cultural space with some more positive things.
Yeah, we need on a previous stream of Michael's, we looked at books we liked, and I brought out the recent Peter Tomasi's Superman, which is from the Rebirth area, 2016 and onward for 45 issues. But I pointed out a specific arc in there about fathers and sons.
Oh, that I've actually, that's one of the few things I've read, Blue.
Oh yeah,
yes.
Oh, good. But that goes right along with what you're saying, that we need these things. Yes, I agree. We need these things. Quick question from Michael before we do go. How long was the Republic period, roughly?
I believe it was around 800 years, off the top of my head. And by the way, Blue, I said earlier it was about 600 years between the collapse of the two, and I looked it up. I was a few decades off, but it was pretty close. So not bad. Having not looked at that in a while.
You said something to the...
Yeah, you had fall of Carthage in 147 BC. BC, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. So you had that in 147 BC, if I remember my dates correctly. And then the fall of Rome was in 495 AD.
Okay. So that leads to I'm going to try and end with a really silly question in a minute. But yeah, I appreciate Liam for what he's trying to do. I think it's incredibly important. That guy has said openly, I have to remember not to repeat anything that's been said to me privately ever, but he has said openly that he helps his neighbors' kids learn to read just because they're the neighborhood kids from around. So the guy has a big, caring heart, and I'm glad that he has this channel to put it into in his writing, that hopefully, his desire to really help the world, that, because sometimes it's hard not to put the world on your own shoulders. And, I really hope he finds good fulfillment in putting out a story that would be good for people, if that's the way everything plays out. So I appreciate Liam a lot. So I guess we can't have him watch this video though, because we're saying that. So,
yeah, we don't need his orange head to get any bigger.
Yeah, he'll fall over. So change the tilt of the earth. So let's see. Michael is currently reading Meta Barons, but had to do it digitally. That's good. He said this was really good listening. Yeah, thank you, Poland. I appreciate you being here and all of your input. So
appreciate you having me. Been fun.
We'll do this again and go over more just shilling, in demands until you're ready to talk. But what was the silly question? Oh crap!
Yeah, maybe next time I can show off my very first comic books I ever purchased. I always reference them, and they're deep in one of my short boxes. But I think it'd be cool, and I would recommend people picking them up. I know some people don't want to buy anything from DC or Marvel, and I understand that principle stance. But I really think that these creators who are working on these books are worth it. Like I got the Rebirth as a gift, the omnibus for that, and that was freaking amazing. So I don't think you should write everything off necessarily. I know some people like to do that, but I think there's still some stuff definitely worth reading out there. And I would just like to show those off because, like I said, that's what led me here. So without that stuff, I would not be sitting here talking to you right now.
Yeah. And last night I was catching up on Robert Venditti's Hawkman, which is current, and in it, he and Hawkwoman attack a demigod of some kind, and when their attack doesn't work, Hawkman asks, "Is that it?" and or something to that effect, and she says, "No, he bleeds. That's a start." And that's so important relative to to understanding tactics and strategy, and what you're saying that Hannibal did with the Roman Empire. He proved to everybody around them they can bleed. And then what did that mean later for when the Visigoths came to them? So this learning how to think does get passed on in story very well. So anyway, but that's wow, Hawkman and the fall of the Roman Empire. All right. So my silly question for you as a historian is, my understanding might be wrong. So is it true that there is no year zero, that we went from 1 BC to 1 AD?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I got something right. So, hey, Poland, thank you. I've really enjoyed your company. We have one question I'll let you answer before we sign off. According to Horace or Propertius, they wrote the city was destroyed and symbolically plowed. Polybius, a friend of and companion of the African campaign, said the city was full of ruins. Does this address the salt question?
I don't know if that necessarily says it wasn't salted though. They really hated us. And I do say us. I consider those to be my people.
Yeah.
Everything I've ever read says, that they salted it, but that could just be a reference to saying something along the lines of they were, annihilated, even if something wasn't completely annihilated. Could just be a turn of phrase.
Yeah, a gestural use of the idea of salted the fields kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
They say that, Carthage will never come back, so to speak. And that was the intention as well.
Right.
We had become quite the annoying weed.
Okay. Well, hey, Shane, thanks for putting that out there for us. Poland, you have a
We'll
good
follow
night.
up, Shane.
Yeah. I think that's it. Good night, Poland.
Night, Blue.
All right. Chat, thanks for being here. You guys all have a good day. Bye. Take care.